The Zags just got some fresh bulletin board material after the WCC coaches snubbed them from the end of the season awards in a blatant and honestly pretty disgraceful way.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Folks, it is time for us to be mad on the internet. We are upset. The Zags fandom has had some happiness in the last couple of weeks. There was a lot of angst, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger early in the season when Gonzaga was struggling, when they lost to Washington, when they lost to San Diego State, when they lost to Santa Clara. And lately, it has been pretty smooth sailing for the Zags. They got that big win over Santa Clara on Thursday night in the second half, dominated St. Mary's on Saturday, cemented their spot in the NCAA tournament, and all was good. And then the WCC decided to announce their awards on Tuesday morning, and that is what we were talking about today. We'll close the show with the Lady Zags, who dominated the WCC end of season awards. Not a surprise there, but we're going to start with some pretty obvious, pretty blatant, pretty disrespectful votes on the men's side, because this is just not acceptable. I know Gonzaga did not win the WCC this year. I understand that. But the awards aren't only for the teams that won. And even beyond that, Gonzaga they didn't get any. There are 6 major awards. For the first time since 2014, it has been a decade since Gonzaga did not get a single one of the 6 end of the season awards. That would be Player of the Year, Newcomer of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, Sixth Man of the Year, and Freshman of the Year. 0 for 6 for Gonzaga in these awards. We're going to go through them one by one. We're also going to talk about the All-WCC first team, the second team, the honorable mentions, some talk about whether some Zags should have been in those conversations as well. But we're going to start with Player of the Year, an award that was given to Augustas Marciulionis, this starting point guard, I guess, starting combo guard kind of for St. Mary's. He's had a good year. Look, I'm not trying to take anything away from Marciulionis, averaging about 12.5 points, 5 assists, 3 boards, 1.5 steals per game on the season. Here's what he did in conference play: 14 points, 6.5 assists, 3.4 boards, 1.5 steals. That's pretty good. 14, 6.5 assists, good numbers, good quality numbers, 39% on threes. Here's what he did against Gonzaga, San Francisco, and Santa Clara, the 3 best non-St. Mary's teams in the WCC. 10.5 points, 6 assists, shot 38% from the field, shot 33% from 3. So about 10.5 points and 6 assists per game against the 3 best teams in the country. In the conference. Here's what Graham Ike did against the 3 best teams in the conference. Of course, for him, it would be St. Mary's, San Francisco, and Santa Clara. Against those 3 teams in 6 games, Graham Ike, 19.1 points, 7.6 rebounds, shot 57.7% from the field. So to reiterate, Graham Ike's numbers against the 3 best teams in the conference are significantly better than Marciulionis's, not only against the 3 best teams in the conference, but Marciulionis's overall numbers for the entirety of the WCC season and for the entirety of the entire season. Every single game that Marciulionis played, the numbers that he put up were not as good as Graham Ike's numbers in 6 games against the best teams in the conference. Not even close. Not even close. Now, Graham Ike's overall numbers are a bit lower than that. He dominated against the best teams in the conference, but overall, Graham Ike still on the season, in every game that Gonzaga played, 17 points, 7 boards, 1 assist, shot 63.1% on 2-pointers, also shot 35.5% from 3. Tiny sample size, but still worth acknowledging that is better than the percentage that Augustas Marciulionis shot from 3 this year. Graham Ike should have been the Player of the Year. He's statistically better. He was more impactful individually to his team. The only argument is that St. Mary's finished with a better record than Gonzaga. That's it. That is the only argument. Gonzaga didn't lose to St. Mary's. To Santa Clara. I don't know that this happens. You're saying that Augustas Marciulionis deserves Player of the Year over Graham Ike because Gonzaga lost to Santa Clara in January. That makes no sense to me. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Marciulionis. He's a very talented player. He found himself in the WCC season. He struggled early in the year, really found his niche, and was excellent for St. Mary's this season. Graham Ike was better. There's no debate. And honestly, Player of the Year going to a St. Mary's player, while I don't think Marciulionis deserved it, was not the most egregious thing that happened. I can understand feeling like the Player of the Year award should go to a player on the best team. I don't agree with it, but I can understand it. What I cannot understand is how the Newcomer of the Year award did not go to either Graham Ike or Ryan Nembhard. It went to Jonathan Mogbo. Again, great player, have talked him up extensively on this podcast. He does not hold a candle to Graham Ike. I mean, it's not even close. I don't understand this at all. Season stats, we'll start there. Mogbo, 14.7 points, 10.3 boards, 3.5 assists. That's really good. 65% on twos, 69% from the free throw line, not an area of strength for him. That's his season numbers. And yeah, they're good. His numbers against Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and Santa Clara. 10.8 points, 8.8 boards, 47% from the field. He never topped 16 points against any of those teams. He had 16 points against Santa Clara. That's the only time he was over 15 points against any of those top three teams. Graham Ike against those three teams, obviously replacing Gonzaga with San Francisco. Again, we already talked about it. 19 points, 7.6 boards, 57% from the field. He was so much better than Jonathan Mogbo against the best teams. 10 percentage points better from the field. Averaged nearly twice as many points. Averaged just a little less rebounds. Like, it's not even close. It is not even close. Ryan Nembhard's numbers against the three best teams in the WCC, St. Mary's, San Francisco, Santa Clara, 17.3 points, 5.6 assists, 55% from the field. Again, I don't think that this award should be selected entirely based on how you did against the three best teams. You could argue that that's an arbitrary unit of measurement, but these numbers aren't even close. Graham Ike and Ryan Nembhard were significantly better than Jonathan Mogbo during the WCC season. They were better than him during the entire season, and they were significantly better than him against the best teams in the conference. Jonathan Mogbo had a 30.18 rebound game against Pacific in a game, mind you, that San Francisco almost lost in overtime to one of the worst teams in college basketball. Jonathan Mogbo building up stats in games against crappy teams that San Francisco barely won is not comparable to Graham Ike putting this team on his back and carrying them to a ridiculous 2-0 week when they desperately needed it, and putting this team in the NCAA tournament to continue a streak that started in the 90s. There is no comparison in my mind between Graham Ike and what he did this year and Jonathan Mogbo and what he did this year. With no disrespect to Mogbo, he may be the better NBA prospect. He may be, I don't even think he's the better actual basketball player. I don't think he is, but there is no way that you can legitimately look at who's the best newcomer in the WCC this year. Look at what Graham Ike did. Look at what Ryan Nembhard did. Look at what Jonathan Mogbo did, and pick Jonathan Mogbo if you're being at all serious about this. You just can't. It's just not a valid argument. I don't understand it. The rest of the awards, not quite as, they don't quite inspire as much emotion. Let's put it that way. Defensive Player of the Year went to Mitchell Saxon. I don't love this. Did anybody, if you watched Saturday's game, did Mitchell Saxon look like the best defensive player in the WCC? Graham Ike torched him in that game, torched him. Having said that, the numbers at least paint a solid picture for Saxon. He's averaging 7.3 rebounds per game. He's averaging 1.4 blocks per game. The blocks is tied for the lead in the conference alongside Kevin Patton, the freshman at San Diego. The 7.3 rebounds, he's 14th in the WCC in defensive rebounds, which frankly is pretty ugly. He's 7 foot tall. You shouldn't be outside the top 10. You're the starting center for the best team in the conference, and you're not a top 10 defensive rebounder. Part of that is because St. Mary's gets less rebounds, because they force less shots, because of the style that they play. I understand that. I thought it should have been Mogbo, but that's because I thought Mogbo shouldn't have been the newcomer of the year. I thought that should have been Graham Ike or Ryan Nembhard. There's also obviously a very strong argument for Anton Watson. The numbers don't back up Watson as much as they have in the past in previous years when he has also been snubbed from this award, but they do, the eye test indicate Watson's phenomenal defensive player. He was asked to play post defense. He was asked to play perimeter defense. He was asked to play trap defense. He did all of it successfully. Gonzaga had one of their better defensive teams in Watson's entire career this year, in part because guys like Drew Timme weren't in the picture anymore. But Anton Watson, I think, deserved this award. I thought Jonathan Mogbo deserved this award. I thought both those guys were more deserving than Mitchell Saxon. Frankly, I thought Joshua Jefferson was more deserving than Mitchell Saxon, although he got hurt at the end of the year, and I think that probably prevented some people from giving him votes. But I thought Mitchell Saxon was 4th, 5th most deserving guy for this award. But the fact that this isn't even at the top of my list of grievances with the WCC awards kind of tells you all that you need to know. The last couple awards here, Coach of the Year, Randy Bennett. I don't have an issue with this. I've seen people in the Discord channel saying like, well, if Randy deserved it this year, then Mark Few deserved it 22 of the last 24 years or whatever. Yeah, he probably did. Coach of the Year is tough because if you just give it to the team that finishes the best every year, like that's not how it should be given. Randy inherited had a team that had trouble early in the year. They lost Logan Johnson. They lost Kyle Bowen. They struggled to find their roles. He helped this team figure it out. They figured out what to do with Marciulionis to put him in a position to succeed. They figured out what to do with Alex Dukas. Joshua Jefferson had a massive sophomore leap. I thought that Randy Bennett did a really good job of coaching this team this year. I also thought Mark Few did a great job, but I'm not surprised that Randy won. I don't have an issue with this happening. To be honest, I think this is fine. 6th man of the year went to Deuce Turner, and I didn't mention Deuce Turner on Tuesday's show in part because I didn't realize how often he had come off the bench. Turner, I think this is probably the safest one. 16 points per game, 2.5 boards, 2 assists, shot 38% from 3, played 29 games for San Diego, only started 11 of them. If he had started more games, obviously we'd be having a different conversation, but because he only started 11 of the team's 29 games, he averaged 16 points per game. I think that's a pretty clear one there. And the only one that I really don't have any issues with. Freshman of the Year is the final one here. This award went to Ryan Beasley. And I don't love this. I don't love it. Ryan Beasley averaged 8 points, 2.5 boards, 1.8 assists. Braden Huff averaged 9.8 points, 3.7 boards, shot 72% from the field, or at least on 2-pointers. Tyler Harris, 12 points, 7 boards, 1 assist, 36% from 3. Kevin Patton, 9.5 points, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.5 blocks. Really, really, really good stuff from Kevin Patton. Here's the deal. Braden Huff has better stats. He played on a better team. He has a brighter future. I don't know how you don't pick Braden Huff. Tyler Harris has significantly better stats than everybody on this list. Much, much better. He missed some time, but he has much better stats. And then you have Kevin Patton, who's more impactful. Really good defensive player, one of the best defensive players in the conference. I think there's a legitimate argument that all of Braden Huff, Tyler Harris, Kevin Patton deserve to be ahead of Ryan Beasley. I don't think Ryan Beasley's a bad player. I don't see why he got the award over guys who had better stats than him or guys who were on better teams than him, or in the case of Braden Huff, both. Well, we're going to talk about the All-WCC first team, the second team, the honorable mentions. Nolan Hickman left off the first team. We're not done with our grievances with the WCC. We're going to talk about why Nolan Hickman should have made it, why Dusty should have been on that all-freshman team. All that coming up after a word from today's sponsor, Game Time. Folks, sometimes family events are best when they are planned at the spur of the moment. And for that, you need Game Time, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And we're just a couple days away from the WCC Tournament, and Game Time would be a great place for those of you who have not done so yet to get some tickets. You can just get tickets for the last couple of games. Game Time is perfect for that type of event. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, new Game Time users who use code LOCKEDON, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2. Still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags, and you bet we're still talking about the WCC awards that came out on Tuesday morning. If you are not a social media user, if you're not on the Discord channel, if you're not on Twitter, you may not have seen all of the consternation, the conversation around this. Drew Timme's tweeting about it. Eric McClellan's tweeting about it. Just about everybody is tweeting about this. It was a huge, huge, huge storyline on Tuesday. You can argue whether it matters, how much it matters, whatever. It's a couple years in a row where Gonzaga's got fairly obviously disrespected by the WCC coaches. And I think that there's some bulletin board material, some frustration about not feeling like you're getting what you deserve from the conference. Now, we talked about the individual awards, the fact that Gonzaga got swept on all 6 of those awards when they had a handful of candidates who could have won some of those awards. Now, I want to look at the first team, All-WCC, which, as a reminder, the WCC has 10 players selected for their first team. They have 5 players for their second team. This year, they had, I think, 9 or 10 or so honorable mentions as well. And then we're going to talk about the freshman team as well to close it out. Here are your 10 players on the first team for the WCC at the conclusion of the 23-24 season. Alphabetical order, for the record. Michael Ejim from Pepperdine. Adama Alpha-Ball from Santa Clara. Graham Ike from Gonzaga. Good. Aidan Mahaney and Augustas Marciulionis from St. Mary's. Jonathan Mogbo from San Francisco. Ryan Nembhard from Gonzaga. Yes. Mitchell Saxon from St. Mary's. Sure. Anton Watson from Gonzaga. Thank goodness they did not make that same mistake as they did last year. And then rounding it out is Marcus Williams at San Francisco. Second team, real quickly, that is where Nolan Hickman is, as well as Alex Dukas from St. Mary's, Wayne McKinney III from San Diego, Tyler Robertson from Portland, and then Deuce Turner from San Diego. I don't have as many issues with this. Generally, I think this is fine. There aren't any glaringly obvious things. However, I'm going to pick 4 of the guards, 2 of them who are on the second team, 2 of them who are on the first team, and we're going to do a little comparison. We're going to look at their stats a little bit. The 2 players from the first team are Marcus Williams and Aidan Mahaney. The 2 players from the second team are Nolan Hickman, of course, and Tyler Robertson. Points per game, Tyler Robertson, 16.5, followed by Hickman at 14. Those are your two guys on the second team, followed by Williams at 13.9, followed by Mahaney at 13.7. So everybody's really close except Robertson, who's got a nice little bump there. Assists per game, Williams leads 3.8, Robertson right behind him at 3.7, and then Hickman at 2.7, Mahaney at 2.5. Rebounds, Tyler Robertson, not a surprise, 4.4, 3.4 for Williams, 2.7 for Mahaney. Hickman is the bottom there at 2.3. Williams has 1.5 steals, Hickman 1.1. The other 2 guys are below 1. Hickman, far and away the best 3-point shooter out of the group, 41% compared to 35.5% for Robertson, 35 even for Mahaney, and 33 for Marcus Williams. I think that you could almost make an argument that the 2 guys on the second team deserve to be on the first team compared to the other 2. Head to head with we'll just do Hickman and Mahaney. Hickman, more points per game, more assists per game. Virtually the same amount of rebounds per game, although Mahaney does have an advantage there. Hickman also has more steals per game and shot a significantly better percent from 3. I mean, it feels like that should probably go to Nolan Hickman. The only real argument is that Mahaney was on the better team. Mahaney's probably the 3rd best player on his team, maybe 4th, depending how much you value Joshua Jefferson. Hickman's probably the 3rd or 4th best player on his team as well, but he was just better. He was just better than him. More efficient scorer. Did more scoring, distributed the ball better. The assist numbers are very close. That's more or less a wash. But regardless, having said that, the biggest snub in my mind is Robertson. I cannot believe that in his 93rd year of college basketball eligibility, Tyler Robertson didn't make the All-WCC first team. I get it. Portland was bad. They also won a few games at the end of the year and moved from 8th to 6th. So they were bad, but they were not that bad. Tyler Robertson led the 6th place team in the WCC. He had more points per game than I think probably half the people on the first team, 16.5 points per game, 4.5 boards, 3.7 assists. Like I said, 36% from 3. I am mad on behalf of Tyler Robertson. He should have been an all first teamer. He should have been there over Mahaney. You could make an argument he should have been there over Marcus Williams. I'm okay with Hickman being on the second team. I think he probably should have been on the first team, but I understand why Alpha-Ball is ahead of him. I understand why Ajayi is ahead of him. Obviously, the coaches love Augustas Marciulionis, so he wasn't going to be ahead of him. Nembhard deserved a spot over those guys. So I'm okay with Hickman being off in the sense that it doesn't grate me the same way that the other awards do. But I think Robertson is the more egregious snub in terms of a guy who should have been on the first team who wasn't. So we went through the second team guys. Nobody else that I feel is really egregiously snubbed in that group. Honorable mentions, no Zags on here. I thought Ben Gregg should have been one of the honorable mentions, potentially over Newberry from San Francisco, potentially over Mercavilazzi from LMU. Was surprised that Mercavilazzi was the pick from LMU and not Dominic Harris. Dom doesn't even get an honorable mention. I believe he finished the season leading LMU in scoring. I know he missed a good chunk of the year. Maybe that was why he got left out of that conversation, but I thought he deserved to be in that conversation. I thought Ben Gregg deserved to be in the honorable mention conversation as well. And then looking at the freshman team, we talked about 4 of the 5 already. because we talked about Ryan Beasley winning all freshman or freshman player of the year. We talked about how he probably didn't deserve it over Tyler Harris. He probably didn't deserve it over Braden Huff. He probably didn't deserve it over Kevin Patton. Those are 4 of your 5 picks for all freshman team. Again, I would argue that Beasley's 4th out of that group. The WCC coaches picked him first for whatever that means. The 5th player on the freshman team is Jake Ensminger from Santa Clara. And I thought the spot should have gone to Dusty Stromer. Ensinger is averaging 4.1 points, 4.8 boards, 1.7 assists on the season. Dusty's 5.1 points, 3.6 boards, 1.1 assists. So pretty comparable. Dusty's a better scorer. Ensinger's a better rebounder. They're pretty similar on assists. Dusty was a 34% shooter from 3. Emsinger was 29% from 3, but Emsinger was a more efficient overall shooter. But Dusty's on the better team. And if they're going to give St. Mary's every award they can because that's the better team, Dusty should have gotten this spot. Better. I think part of it is because Dusty didn't play at the expectation that some had for him, so they feel like they have to take that away. Tyler Harris was a nobody who had a great year. Of course, he's on the list. Beasley wasn't a nobody. He was a decently known prospect, but he had a good year, so he's on the list. Stromer didn't have the year that people thought he would. I think the expectations for him were too high, but because he didn't meet the expectations, I think that's why people bumped him down a little bit. Seeing a player who started the season as a starter and got relegated to the bench, I think it's hard for coaches to reward that player. Having said that, Dusty Stromer was one of the 5 most valuable freshmen in the WCC last year, and I think he deserved that 5th and final spot. Don't feel nearly as strongly about that as I do about Graham Ike and Ryan Nembhard getting snubbed for Newcomer and some of the other frustrations that we have let out here on this show, but I do think Dusty was somebody who probably deserved a nod there, and he didn't get it. Well, there is far less to complain about with the Women's WCC Awards. The Zags took 4 out of 6. They dominated the first team. I don't know how it could have gone any other direction. We're going to get to more of that after a word from today's sponsor, eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what helps keep your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that W. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, folks, closing out the show today, talking Gonzaga women's basketball because their awards also came out on Tuesday. Much less conversation, much less strife, because the Zags did about as well as you could have expected them to do. From the WCC Awards perspective, the 4 out of 6 of the major awards went to Gonzaga. The 2 that did not, they didn't really have any candidates for. That was Newcomer of the Year and Freshman of the Year. The Zags pretty much played all returners. They had a couple freshmen who played a little bit. They had one transfer from Utah, Nia Jukwu. Neither of them averaged more than 1.2 points per game. So, of course, they're not going to pick up those awards. Newcomer of the Year went to Freja Worth at San Francisco. Freshman of the Year went to Zaria Akuso at St. Mary's, because there were no candidates for the Zags for those awards. The rest of the awards, however, went to the Zags. Player of the Year, no mystery, no surprise, no shock whatsoever. Yvonne Ejim is your Player of the Year. She's averaging 20 points per game. That is 22nd in the country. She has now scored in double figures in 35 consecutive games, a streak that dates back to last year. And this becomes the 12th time that a Zag has won the WCC Women's Player of the Year. It is the second year in a row that a Zag has won it. Tremendous stuff from Yvonne. We've talked about her as an All-American candidate. We've talked about her as a Player of the Year candidate. Of course, somebody named Caitlin Clark's probably going to take home that award, but Yvonne is an All-American candidate. And she has played exactly like that this season. And 100%, it would have been the crime of the century if she was not picked for this award. Not quite as bad as it would have been if Coach Lisa Fortier was not picked for Coach of the Year. That would have been a legitimate, we'd have to do an investigation. That would be insanity if any other coach in the WCC was picked. There was just no possible way that could have happened. Lisa Fortier is a legitimate Coach of the Year candidate in the entire country. If this Gonzaga women's team makes it to the Elite Eight, I think she wins Coach of the Year. I really do. She is undefeated in the WCC this year. In her career, Coach Fortier, 81-5 in the WCC. That is a winning percentage of 94%. Has anyone dominated a conference? Like, if this was the worst college basketball conference in the country, and it's not. If this was the MEAC or the SWAC or something like that, a team winning 94% of their first 86 games would be incredible. It would still be incredible. And Lisa's doing this in a conference that's top third in women's basketball conferences. It is insane, the level of success that she has had leading the Gonzaga women's basketball team the last half decade, full decade, however long it's been. It's been a while. This is her 6th Coach of the Year award, so it's been more than a half decade, at least we know that. Undefeated this year, Coach of the Year candidate, 83 points per game for the Zags this year. Their margin of victory was 22 on average this year. We talked about it a handful of times. 8 of their 16 games, they won by 25 or more points this season. I think they won 4 of them by more than 35 points, something like that. Just a ridiculous level of dominance from this team this year. More deserving than anybody else for any of these awards was Coach Fortier for Women's Coach of the Year. Defensive Player of the Year also went to Yvonne Ejim. She's the first Zag to win Defensive Player of the Year award since 2013. She was 3rd in the league in double-doubles. She was 3rd in the league in rebounds. She was 5th in the league in block shots. Again, just a dominant performance from her on both ends of the floor. Not a shock to see her win both of these awards. 6th Woman of the Year went to Maud Hubens. She's fantastic, 6.7 points per game coming off the bench, about 4 boards, about 1.5 assists. She scored in double figures 6 times this year. She scored 15 points 3 different times. The Zags were really kind of a top-heavy team. They had this phenomenal starting 5 with the Trung twins, with Liza Hollingsworth, with Brenda Maxwell, and then with Yvonne Ejim. But they had key bench pieces as well. Maud and Callie in particular, Callie Stokes, both played phenomenally coming off the bench. Esther Little did some nice things off the bench as well. Bree Salenbien before she got hurt. But Maud was kind of the leader of the bench mob for this team, and she had some really, really solid performances. This is the 3rd time in the last 4 years that a women's Gonzaga player has won the 6th Woman of the Year award. Melody Kempton was among them. She, of course, had a phenomenal final season in Spokane. Yvonne Ejim was among them as well. So there's a path to a lot of success for Maud going forward. She's a senior next year. She potentially could have a really big breakout year. We know Yvonne's coming back. But we also know Eliza Hollingsworth is graduating. We know the Trung twins are graduating. So there's certainly minutes. Brenna's graduating as well. There are definitely minutes to be had in all across Gonzaga's team next year. I think Maud's going to take on a very big role next season. Looking at the first team, no real surprises here as well. 4 of the 5 Gonzaga starters made the first team. That's, of course, the 4 that we just mentioned: Yvonne, Brenda Maxwell, Kaylee, and Kaylin Trung. All 4 of them ended up making it. On the second team is where you had Eliza Hollingsworth. Yeah, there's probably an argument that Eliza could have made the first team as well, but I'm okay with the Zags not getting every single one of their starters on the first team, even though their level of dominance in the WCC probably could have merited having everybody in that conversation. Still a phenomenal performance from Eliza this year, and of course, the other 4 starters to make that first team. No honorable mentions for the Zags. Again, all 5 of their starters already got themselves some awards, so they didn't need anything else. No freshman team players from Gonzaga, because Claire O'Connor was their only freshman who really played pretty much at all this last year, and she averaged 1.2 points per game. So there just wasn't any room. Again, Lisa's done a really good job of developing players kind of behind the scenes. So I think players like Claire, like Maud, like Callie, like Esther Little will show the talent that they have in the years going forward. And I think that's when we'll see some of those players really break out, especially next year when they have so much talent who is graduating this year. It's going to wrap it up for us today. We'll be back on Thursday speaking to my friend Zach Farmer, the host of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. We will be getting you all ready for the WCC Tournament, the first couple of games that take place on Thursday between Pacific and Pepperdine. Lorenzo Romar, he got canned. For those of you who listened to yesterday's show, you heard me talk about Leonard Perry. I didn't mention Romar because it hadn't happened yet, but now we're going to have a matchup on Thursday between 2 coaches who are interims as the head coaches have been fired. We'll talk about that and the rest of the WCC Tournament on Thursday's show. Want to thank all of you for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Remind you to join us on our Discord channel if you have not done so yet. And until tomorrow, as always, go Zags.